Many of these canyons, it was as if the reservoir had never been. Small plants and ferns were beginning to reestablish hanging gardens all along the walls as cottonwood shoots, willows, and wildflowers spread across the newly exposed ground. In many locations, the familiar red patina, which stains the cliffs, was already beginning to obliterate the reservoir's bathtub rim. When I first embarked on this project, I was primarily motivated by my desire to explore and photograph places that I thought were lost forever, to search for warm, reflected light in canyons few people had ever seen. But as my project evolved, it took on additional meaning, as I realized it was about much more than simply photographing beautiful sandstone canyons. It was about witnessing the transformation of these places as life reclaimed the barren ground. Willow Gulch provided the most remarkable example of this process. Located near the southern end of Hole in the Rock Road, Willow has carved a deep serpentine groove into the Navajo sandstone on its short journey to the Escalante River. On my first trip to Willow in the spring of 2004, I wandered down the canyon to discover a mile-long devastation zone filled with crumbling sediment banks, wind-blown tumbleweeds, and skeletons of drowned cottonwood trees. Exactly 3 years later, I returned to Willow and witnessed a phenomenal change. Where there had been nothing but devastation, life now flourished. Thick stands of willow and cattail crowded the sandy banks along the shallow stream. Cottonwood seeds had sprouted into 15-foot-tall trees. The canyon was filled with the sounds of birds, frogs, and flowing water. A sculpted 10-foot-tall waterfall, which had been entirely buried beneath the reservoir sediment on my previous trip, was now fully exposed. Further down the canyon, I rounded the last bend in the walls and saw the stagnant waters of the reservoir. The scene immediately changed back to one of devastation. In what I came to refer to as the dead zone, that place where the reservoir meets the land, bubbles rose through oozing muck at the reservoir's edge, while dead cottonwood logs floated on the scum-covered water. All greenery had vanished, and the canyon was dead silent except for the sound of an idling motorboat around the next bend. Anxious to return to the living world of the canyon above the reservoir, a profound feeling swept over me as I retreated upstream around that first bend. I was immediately out of the dead zone and surrounded again by willows, cattails, cottonwoods, and the sounds of life. It was as if a line had been drawn in the sand. Down canyon was an example of how we manage the world, and here was an example of how nature manages things. As my explorations continued, I began to understand that there was no place on the entire Colorado Plateau, or indeed anywhere on Earth, quite like Glen Canyon. I had spent the previous 10 years seeking out and photographing deep, narrow canyons all across the region. By the late 90s, I felt like I was beginning to run out of new places to explore. But here in Glen Canyon, these deep, twisting, sensuous sandstone canyons were around every other bend, with names like Labyrinth, Twilight, Cascade, Driftwood, and Reflection. My excursions into this small slice of what was once Glen Canyon turned into one of the most profound experiences of my life. Along the way, I was lucky enough to team up with Annette, who shared my passion for Glen Canyon, and my photography project soon evolved into our book. The photographs in the film you're about to see are the record of that journey. With the exception of the historical video clips, all images in this film, including those in the opening sequence, were captured between 2003 and 2007 at locations once buried beneath the waters of Lake Powell. After the film, Annette will offer a few additional comments, and then we'll take questions. Thank you for allowing us to share our experiences with you, and enjoy the film.
Glen Canyon and the Colorado River. Twilight Canyon. 50 Mile Gulch. Cascade Canyon. Smith Fork Canyon. The places no one knew. When the diversion tunnels around Glen Canyon Dam were screwed shut in 1963, the waters of the Colorado River backed up to form Lake Powell. The reservoir flooded 186 miles of the Colorado River's main channel and nearly 200 side canyons. This labyrinth of canyons was given the name Glen Canyon by John Wesley Powell during his Colorado River Survey of 1869. Once the ecological heart of the Southwest's river systems, Glen Canyon was where the Green, San Juan, Dirty Devil, and Escalante rivers all converged. In June 1999, Lake Powell was at 95% capacity with over 20 million acre-feet of stored water. By June of 2003, after 3 years of well below average precipitation in the upper Colorado River Basin, the lake level had dropped 95 feet, losing 50% of its storage capacity. As the reservoir retreated, Glen Canyon returned from the grave. With continued below-average precipitation in recent years, the lake has remained half-empty or less since 2003, and there is no scenario, beyond flooding of biblical proportions, in which it would be full again anytime soon. By April 2005, 5 years of drought reduced the surface area of the massive reservoir from 252 square miles to 119. As the water receded, exposed mudflats at the base of Hype Marina's boat ramp shriveled in the dry desert air, a location once 95 feet below the surface. When Lake Powell was last full in 1999, its waters extended 35 miles upriver from this location. By April 2003, after 3 years of drought, a 95-foot-tall bathtub ring surrounded lower Walwheat Bay, and the reservoir had lost 50% of its storage capacity. By April 2005, after 2 of the driest years ever recorded in the Colorado River Basin, the water level had dropped another 50 feet to attain its recent all-time low of 145 feet below full pool. A mere 32% of the reservoir's capacity remained, and the concrete boat ramp at Walwheat Marina no longer reached the water. A shuttered ghost town was all that remained of the abandoned Hype Marina, and old tires once used as breakwaters around the boat docks provided the only clue that this was once a center of boating recreation. Skeletons of cottonwood trees, drowned by the rising waters of the reservoir when it first filled over 40 years ago, rose from the turbid waters along Davis Gulch. As the reservoir has shriveled, hundreds of miles of twisting side canyons have seen the light of day for the first time in over 40 years. Between April 2003 and October 2007, journalist Annette McGivney and photographer James Kay ventured deep into the narrow, dewatered canyons of Glen Canyon to document these historic changes.
This is James Kay. When I first set out to explore and photograph the dewatered canyons surrounding Lake Powell, I imagined myself floundering through boot-sucking mud beneath dead cottonwood trees along canyon bottoms filled wall to wall with thickets of tamarisk. Much to my amazement, however, I soon realized I was witnessing a transformation from death to life, as the reemerging canyons quickly recovered their natural diversity and beauty as the reservoir's water drained away.